Hello, I'm Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz and welcome to another in our series of double shot interviews where we bring in some expert or CEO or minister and talk about the stuff we care about here at interest.co.nz, which includes rental property, property investment, what's happening with property prices, and no better person to talk about it than our regular contributor, Olly Newland, an expert on property investment and an old-time investor in lots of different types of rental property, commercial property, those sorts of things.
Say that again.
Olly, welcome back to interest.co.nz. Firstly, we've seen this week the government announce an inquiry by this new Productivity Commission into housing affordability. What do you think?
I think it's a waste of time. Simple as that. I think it'll end up 2 or 3 years down the track as a large pile of paper and a doorstop. I think it's being an election year that they're coming up with noises to appease the public, and it's coming too late. The horse is bolted.
We don't have a housing affordability problem?
We do have a housing affordability problem, but that's common in many countries indeed. But it's only an affordability problem for beginners, if you like, or first home buyers. It's no longer an affordability problem for the mass of people. Once you get on the property ladder, you're away.
But if you can't get on the ladder, surely that's a problem.
That is a problem. That is a problem. It is the first home buyer, for them it is a problem, no doubt about it.
So how do we fix a problem like that?
Well, if you look at what other countries have done, Australia, for instance, our nearest neighbour, they've got all sorts of inducements and incentives for first home buyers. They waived stamp duty up to, I think, $500,000. There's other tax advantages given, bonuses and all sorts of GST and arrangements and so forth. We don't have anything like that here. So if the Affordability Committee, or whatever they call themselves, do anything, they should be looking at how to get first home buyers into their own home first, and then once they're on the ladder, they're away.
But don't those measures in Australia simply pump up the prices?
Yes, they do, but you've got a choice. You have people sleeping on the street or they're living in a house. You take your pick.
But isn't part of the problem with affordability a lack of supply of new houses onto the market?
That is another problem. New Zealand is lucky, in inverted commas, that we have a housing shortage. In many other countries, such as Spain or Portugal or Ireland or something like that, or the States, they have a housing glut. We have a shortage created through leaky homes, through non-building, through, unfortunately, the earthquake, which we can discuss later. We have a housing shortage building up, and that will pump up prices in the long run.
So you're based in Auckland.
Yep.
What are you seeing with Auckland rental property rents, supply, demand? What are you seeing there at the moment?
Well, there's no doubt. The figures and the anecdotal evidence I've got is that rental properties in the heart of Auckland especially are going through the roof. There are queues. We've seen examples of that, queues of people trying to get into reasonable rental properties. There's a shortage because we have disincentives out there now for investors to go into the rental market. This will spread through the country slowly. This is not going to happen today or tomorrow or next week or next month even, but it will happen over the next year or two where we're going to have a crisis for sure. And we're going to see slum landlord or tenants being locked out or sky high rents or whatever you like to call it. And there'll be another scandal, and this is sure to come, and I'm picking that.
Is it across Auckland or just in parts of it?
It's in the centre of Auckland mainly. People are moving back into the centre of town because of costs of transport and petrol and that sort of thing. And the outer suburbs will catch up later, and it'll spread to other centres as well. Not to the countryside, but mainly to the main centres. I've seen this all before. I've been through this all before. I saw it in the 80s, I saw it in the 70s. A sort of deja vu very much for me. You can see what's coming, and if I was so inclined, I'd stock up, but I'm not so inclined at the moment.
You're not going to stock up?
Not quite, no.
Why is that?
Well, dealing with tenants and rising rents and the Rent Appeal Board or Tenancy Act and that sort of thing is not for me. I've got past that. I'd rather deal with commercial tenants and have very small involvement with residential tenants because there's too many disincentives out there. But good luck to many people. There's still a good way to make money.
Now, getting onto this commercial area, we've had the earthquake in Christchurch, and many owners of commercial buildings, particularly older commercial buildings in the centre of Christchurch or in some shopping centres in suburbs, have really been hit hard by the earthquake. Some are insured, some are underinsured, some aren't insured at all. What lessons do you think commercial property owners could take from the earthquake, particularly around the area of insurance?
This is a tough one because I don't think anybody's really worked out how the insurance companies are going to deal with the problem, because when it comes to commercial property, because it's nobody sort of envisaged that not, when an earthquake comes, that not only is the building destroyed, but the land under it is destroyed as well. You can cope with a fire, God forbid, or an earthquake that tumbles a building down, but when the land underneath it itself is destroyed, that becomes a whole different ball game. And how the insurance companies are going to deal with that it's still too early in the piece. Read your policy and ask your insurance broker if it's covered, and get a letter out of them if you can. But there are no guarantees, and I think there's going to be a very big winter of discontent this winter and next winter and the winter after with commercial property investors in Christchurch and the insurance companies. I think there'll be a lot of aggravation.
And what about people leaving Christchurch, going into other areas? Some have come to Auckland. What are you seeing around Auckland on that?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience. I had, for instance, I've got a shop to let, which is let now, and of the 25 calls I had for that shop, at least 15 of them were locals, and the other 10 were from Christchurch. And many of them said, "I'll take it over the phone." They wanted to take it over the phone then and there, and I said, "No, we don't do things like that. That's not fair." And in the end, we didn't let it to a Christchurch person. But this is what happens. And I've heard also that lots of rental properties are being snapped up by Christchurch people who just can't take any more. And you never know. Unfortunately, it's a tragedy. You don't know when the shaking is going to stop, and you can't really start rebuilding Christchurch until the shaking has stopped, and that could take months, it could take years, it could take a millennium, who knows.
Now, over the last 6 to 12 months, the New Zealand economy, some say, has gone into a double-dip recession, and certainly in the second half of last year, the economy was slow. A lot of retailers are reporting it's tough out there. A lot of New Zealanders aren't spending as much as they once did.
Yes.
As a commercial property owner, what are you seeing? How is that reflected in the way tenants are coming in, going out, demanding? What's happening to your rents, those sorts of things?
Well, there's no question that the country is still in a recession mode. I don't think anybody trying to say otherwise is kidding themselves. It's not falling off the cliff. It's sort of bumbling along, more or less flat. As far as the retail is concerned, they're having a tough time. So rent increases is what landlord investors look for, are far and few between. If there's been long gaps between the last increase and the current increase, you may get something. But I think any sensible landlord investor in a commercial property would be happy to keep his tenant and keep the rents steady. And not anybody, no investor, let alone me, is in the business to throw tenants in the street. And I'm making here and there, the occasional tenant is a bit of bother. I'm making deals with them, not much, just a small amount. But it's better to keep them there till the recovery comes.
So does that mean that you cut rents, or do you just hold them where they are?
You hold them where they are. If they're behind, you sometimes put it on the shelf and let them pay it off. Especially when the weather's bad, it varies, of course. Some tenants, of course, can't help themselves. They're hopeless and they're going to go under in the best of times. But it's your duty as an investor and landlord, if you care for your tenants, to look after them and help them if they're decent folk. That's your duty. That's part of being a good landlord.
But we've got inflation coming through in all sorts of ways, particularly fuel prices, but also we're going to see insurance levies increase with the EQC, the government saying a tripling of levies. That's going to make it tougher, though, for commercial property owners with perhaps flat rents but rising costs.
That's true. That could happen. That's just one of the hazards of the game, that you have rising costs, and we're going to end up with, I think, down the track, some inflation and extra costs, and there'll be a wage price spiral coming for sure, and we just have to grin and bear it. But it doesn't happen suddenly. These things take a long while, sort of osmosis, if you like, of feeding through, and you just have to bear some of the costs and share it with your tenants and gently ease the rents up. And many commercial tenants we're talking about have been a bit slack and not been pushing their businesses as well as they should. And I've got tenants who only open their shops from 10 till 3 sort of thing, and 5 days a week, and all those days are gone. You've got to open early in the morning and work at least 6 days a week, if not 7. So some people are still a bit slack that way.
With commercial property, when interest rates rise, sometimes the values of the properties can fall. Is that a risk if we do have a price-wage spiral that values of commercial properties would fall as interest rates rise.
If interest rates rise, and that's a big question, if interest rates rise, that means we have inflation. And if we have inflation, that means hard assets like property go up in value. There's a hedge against inflation. So you've got this balancing act.
Even commercial property?
Even commercial property, that's right. Because there are certain tax advantages with commercial property that have now been wiped. We can talk about that later with residential. There's certain tax advantages, and there's certain good feeling about owning bricks and mortar that you can control. And it's not quite as simple as that. Interest rates do compete with rents, but you do have some tax advantages with commercial property.
Now, we're getting towards the beginning of April, and the tax changes announced in last year's budget are starting to come through. The removal of LAQCs for residential property investors and the changes to depreciation. What do you think that's going to do to values, or has it already been priced in?
It's been partly priced in, but I think the shock is going to come through in the next few months. The wiping of depreciation on residential is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, and it was a political move. It wasn't done for monetary reasons at all. It was a sort of get back at the property investor type political move, and it's a real cash loss to residential investors. And what will happen is the residential investor will, when they suddenly realise they've got less in their pocket, will do one of two things. They'll either cut back on upgrading the property, which is less jobs, or they're going to push the rents up where they can. And this is, of course, we're seeing that already, and I think it'll accelerate. As far as loss qualifying companies are concerned and all that sort of thing, I've never been a fan for all these dodgy, to me they're dodgy. You should be making a profit, not trying to make a loss. And I don't use those sort of vehicles. Some people swear by them, but I think you should be in the business to make a profit and not try to find ways to make losses. That's my philosophy, and it works.
Olly Newland, thank you very much for visiting us here at Interest.co again. That was another in our series of double shot interviews. I'm Bernard Hickey for Interest.co.nz.